Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad you're here, and we have a ton that we're super excited to cover today. The title of today's webinar is Everything You Wanted to Know About SharePoint Lists and How They Work with Power Automate. We are Spindustry, and we've been in the business for 25 plus years. And along with our SharePoint work, we provide several other services. After today's webinar, you'll receive a link to the recording and the slides. If you have any questions during today's amazing webinar, you can use the questions feature to ask those, and we'll get to them at the end as long as we have time. We tend to go a little bit over sometimes, so if you can't make it all the way to the end, my contact information will be on the last slide of the slide deck, so you can always reach out that way and ask your questions. Besides today's webinar, we have lots of others that are free and easy to access at spindustry.com/webinars. My name is Kelsey Culbertson, and I'll be your host for today. And with me, I have Tavon Graham, who is our senior SharePoint developer, and Jared Edge, who's our director of SharePoint services. I'm going to pass it off to Tavon to tell us what we'll talk about today.
All right, awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. So, like Kelsey mentioned, today's topic is SharePoint lists, what they are, how they work, and how they interact with other applications through my favorite tool, Power Automate. So, we're going to take a look at, lists from all those different perspectives. We're going to start with what they really are and why we think they're such a cool tool, because we don't want to assume that everyone here knows what lists are or has really worked with them in the past. So we'll make sure that we give you that foundation as we keep going. We'll highlight all the features of lists that we think make them stand out from other apps that you're used to using and why we think they're such a underutilized piece of the platform you're already paying for. We'll talk about list forms and the implications of different types of forms, and then again, connecting into those other types of apps and even building apps using lists in Power Automate. And of course, as always, we're going to have plenty of demos as we go.
And I think it's funny to say that we have people that are using SharePoint but may not know what a list is. Like there's lots of organizations that we do work with where we'll step in and they're using libraries. They might even be adding columns, but they've never ventured over into the list aspect of it. And what we want to do out of today is we hope to kind of expand your brains. That's what we always try to do, to just increase your knowledge and let you guys start dabbling it with and utilizing lists for really what you can take advantage of. So really cool stuff coming up today.
Yeah, and that's a super great point, Jared. And I think that's actually a great place to start is with an overview of SharePoint lists.
All right, perfect. So before we can really overview what lists are and why they're cool, I think we should take a step back and really make sure that we're all on the same page with what we mean when we say a SharePoint list. What is a list? Just to make sure that we all are aware, we're not just talking about a, bulleted list in an email or a list of, I don't know, tasks that you wrote down on a piece of paper. What we're talking about when we say lists is something that's very similar to what you're already used to when you work in maybe an Excel document. I think it's pretty safe to say that everyone here has worked with Excel or some other sort of data tracking software like that. Lists follow that same principle. We keep your information organized into rows. We have columns that track different information. And that's really the core of a list, is just holding that raw data in the same way that you do over in Excel.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of third-party applications out there too that people might be using. Like I know, Tavon, this year alone, we've migrated several people from Smart Sheets over into SharePoint List, and that gets rid of an expense for them because when they kind of compare, SharePoint does all the things they need it to do in List, and plus you have all the other tools in Office 365 like Power Automate, Power Apps, all those other things to kind of tie it together even more. And I think that kind of helps people kind of make that switch in a little bit easier.
Yeah, and speaking of making the switch, I think it's also worthwhile to mention from the kind of developer-minded point of view that lists aren't a new concept, right? If you think about your SharePoint environment as a great big database, well, lists are just your tables, right? So for the development audience out there, it's not really that big of a leap from what you're used to seeing over in tools like SQL.
Nice. And I think it's probably important to mention also that there's lots of things that people have started on SharePoint lists. So they started small, but then they grew into actually big apps, if you will. So, for example, I know that there's a lot of there's a lot of people on this webinar today, you guys, so a whole lot. And I know a lot of our clients are medical based. We have a lot of manufacturing based. We have kind of all over the spectrum, but I know that several of the kind of organizations that we work with have to do things like credentialing, or have to do contract management, or have to do facilities management. And in all of those different types of things, List can help you do that. And what we hope to do is show you how to create just a list, right? And get the basics of it, but then show you some examples of multiple lists working together to create an application.
Perfect. And even from the personal perspective, I'll just mention this quickly. Everyone here is used to the same idea of what a list does. I mentioned earlier, writing down tasks on a piece of paper or keeping notes in a bulleted list. You're used to using the same idea as lists, just holding on to that information. But the reason that we think SharePoint lists are so special really comes back to what some of these columns can do for us, what we call metadata. Just a fancy way of saying information about the stuff we're tracking, or information about information. You see a few columns here on the screen, and we're going to take a look at tons of different types of columns that are available in the world of SharePoint as we go through our demos today.
Yep, awesome stuff. So we're going to do a lot of demos. We're also going to talk about the way I can view the data as well. So we'll talk about views inside of my SharePoint list, and we'll give a couple of different just different examples of that as we go through the different lists we're going to show. And then, of course, we also want to make sure that we are just considering permissions. So it's worth mentioning, Tavon, what is it I need to have in order to be able to create a list inside of SharePoint?
Great question. All you'll need to be able to make a list is edit permissions on whatever site we're trying to make that list on. Contribute's not enough. Edit's what you're going to need, edit or stronger. But all of your member groups that are out there that come with your SharePoint sites, if you haven't customized them, those people have edit permissions. So you might want to think about that as an organization. But just so you know, a lot more of you are out there who can actually make lists than you might think.
So if you're the type of person that wants to kind of follow along, you're welcome to follow along in this demo. So the whole first portion of what we're going to do, I'm just going to walk through slowly how to create lists, and then we'll get into just some of the topics that go along with that as we get through there. Or if you're the type of person that just wants, once you get the video for this, because we'll send you the link to the video, once you get that, you can kind of go back through it and you have step-by-steps. But also we have the slide deck, and we won't be showing all of the slide deck today because we'll be doing the demos instead. But in the slide deck, I put step-by-step instructions in there for how to create a list as well. So those of you who are kind of new to this, you have all you need to be able to go through and use this as a lesson as well. So I think having said all that, there's a little dog here. Oh, he wants to do demos. Oh, okay. So let's kind of jump out of these slides and kind of go into demo mode, if that's okay with everybody. All right. So I am here on my TMI IT site, my information site, and this site actually has a lot of lists on it, Tavon, but we're just going to kind of go through creating a list first. So I'll start out by saying, here I am on the home page. In the home page of any site, you guys probably have realized that there's this new button here. And when you click on that new button under here, I could actually just click here to create a list. So that is available for you if you want to go that direction. Personally, I don't use this button, and I try not to teach this button either, because if I'm inside of a list, that new button is not the same, right? And if I'm inside of a library, it has a new button, but it's not the same new button, right? It's a whole different thing. So I think the best way to kind of think about, if you're just looking for a consistent way to work inside of SharePoint, is just go to the cog up here in the right-hand corner. You'll click on that cog and you'll see site contents. If you click on site contents, it'll take you here, and this will always just be consistent for you. It'll always say these things under it, which is create a list or a page or a document library or an app, or go create a subsite. So I'm going to go from here and I'm going to create a list. Now I need to say that you may be looking at my screen and going, wow, Jared, your screen is really fancy and mine is not that fancy. That's because we have the latest update in ours, and this happened maybe a week or two ago to where they changed this dialog. But that doesn't matter. You can still even participate with me if you're coming along, because all we're really going to do is create a blank list, and that will be the first thing in the old dialog as well, or the older dialog will be just to create a list. So we're gonna do that. But you'll notice here in the new dialog, they kind of broke out a few things for us, which is interesting, right? And what they're telling us is we could start from a blank list if we wanted to, or because lists have forms tied to them, and we'll talk more about that in just a little while, I could actually start from the perspective of creating the form. And as I create the form, it'll help me create the list. So that's possible to do if that's the way you think and that helps you out. Or you might start thinking from the view itself. Like, I'm going to have a gallery of stuff. So you start with the view. or I want to have a calendar, so I start with the view of a calendar, or I want to do a Kanban board, that type of thing where I can drag and drop between siloed columns, then yeah, you could start from this point of view. But in reality, all of these are just creating a list. So I just say start with blank list all the time. In addition to that, you could import from an Excel document or CSV or an existing list to create your list as well. Tavon, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean the import feature is pretty nice if you're, trying to take something that was maybe Excel or export it into a CSV and create a list off of it, but it has some flaws, right? What you're going to find a lot of the time is it doesn't really do a great job of mapping out your columns or figuring out what the correct data types for them should be. And, we always talk about content types and how they're pretty useful, so we might recommend using those instead. But even if we're not using a content type, I would personally just make a blank list, set up my columns how I want, and then copy or otherwise import my data from Excel. Because it does actually have a really nice copy and paste interaction with Excel.
Yeah, so I think in reality, all of the things we're going to tell you to do is just start from a blank list, right? So you can just build it up the way that it's supposed to be. Microsoft also threw a bunch of templates down here. So if you were like, oh, I want an expense tracker, well, there's one here. You could start from that if you wanted to and then go forward. What I find with things like this when we try to use them is that it's never exactly what I want. So I end up having to back some of their stuff out and then add some more stuff, which just tells me I should probably just start with, you guessed it, a blank list. So I'm going to go ahead and click on blank list. And then again, my dialog might be a little bit different than yours, but that's okay. All you're going to do is enter the name of the list. Now, let me just talk about that really briefly. So I'm going to create a new list called App Tracker List Demo. And I know you're looking at that and you're thinking, and even the environment's like, this dude doesn't know how to spell. He's supposed to put spaces in between names and things like that. What's going on? And the reason I'm doing this is because when this list gets created, I want its URL to have no spaces in it. And whenever you enter the name of a list or a library, you're creating the URL name and the actual list or library name. So it's better to create it this way first to solidify the URL, because you can always go back and put the spaces in the name that people see, the display name. In addition to that, I'm going to go ahead and add it to my menu over here. So it'll show up on the side. So you see I have one that's already baked in. I'll switch over to that in just a little while. So we'll go ahead and click Create. And then it'll go ahead in the background and create that for me. It usually takes a second or two. And I'll end up with a list here. And now, if you were following along with me and you did that, you can now say that you are a professional list creator, because you are. So it comes with a column called title. But before we get to the columns and such and how to add things there, I'm just going to correct this little name issue that we have. So you'll see up here that my URL is super good, right? It's just no spaces in there, so I don't have those %20s in there. And that's just good practice, best practice. But then for list, not. But for list, I can just come right here, click on this, and actually change the name right here. So I can go and hit the space there, and the space there. Also pick an awesome color, whatever. Oh, it's pink. I'm going to use that for today. And then over here, I am going on a rocket trip. So I'm going to use that guy right there. And then I'm going to save. And now I have the spaces here. And if I was to refresh this page, it also fixed my left-hand navigation, which it did not do when they first came out with it, but I'm so happy to see that it does it now. That's just so convenient for me. So now that I have all that in place, I have a list. I could start adding data to this list, but my list is not quite ready. What my list is supposed to do is track the ID number of an app. It's supposed to allow me to have a description of that app. It's supposed to give me the department who actually owns that app, tell me the actual owner within that department who owns that app, who's responsible for it, give it a review date so that we review it on a regular basis, see if this is still a valid app for us, and then also give me some information about the type of data that should be stored here. And I'm going to give them a choice of PII information or partial PII or no PII. And then also, I have a list of vendors that I didn't even create. Tavon created this list of vendors up here, the approved vendors. And it has some useful data for me because these are the people we buy the apps from. And so I want to link this information into my actual list as well. And we're going to do kind of a lookup with that and talk about these along the way. So I'm going to start creating these columns, and you'll be able to follow along with me, or again on the video, if you want to go back and review it, you'll be able to follow through there. And then Tavon's just going to talk about a few of those columns as we go through it. So my first column I'm going to add, to do it, I'm going to click on the add button here. And you'll see here's all the types of columns that we could create. So I've got text, I've got a choice column, which is for giving someone a drop down of choices. I've got date and time, okay, which gives you a nice little calendar tool for them to select from. Multi-lines of text, which means they could put 2 gigabytes worth of data inside of there, like working in Word or Excel. I've got person, and it tells you right here if it's someone in your organization, you can have that there, or you can even do groups of people as well. I'm just going to do a person. And you have a number column for doing numbers. You've got a yes, no column, which we do not recommend that you use because visually for a user, it has a default already set. So it's either going to be on or off, yes or no, checked or not checked. And the deal is if you wanted someone to make a choice there, if they forgot to make the choice is already there, right? It's either not checked or checked. And that's a problem. So instead of using yes, no, for clarity, use a choice column and put the options yes and no and the default value as blank, and then just require that they have to have something there. So if it's still blank, they didn't make a choice. So those are just tips and tricks that we kind of come up with along the way. Also, we have a hyperlink column for doing hyperlinks. But if I'm doing development, I don't use this column. So I know we have some developers in the audience. If we're doing development, I do not use that column. I actually use a multi-line of text and just have it do straight text and not URLs, because that gives me the option to do all types of URLs instead of having to follow the rules for this particular column. But it is still a useful column, hyperlink. We have currency. Number and currency are very similar to each other. Currency is just already formatted as currency and allows you to pick which type of currency. Is it British, or is it US, that kind of stuff. Location, you could put in like a map coordinate there and it'll show you a map. Image, you can actually have this column have its own image inside of there as well and store that. And that's pretty cool to be able to do. That was actually helpful in many cases that we had to solve. And then my favorite column of all is manage metadata, is my favorite type of choice column when I want to give somebody a list of things to choose from that I want to manage and make sure that it's add consistency into my environment. We're going to give a demo of that and talk about that a little bit more. And then we also have lookups, which we'll talk about as we go through and add a lookup to that other list that I talked about. And then this average rating, which we very rarely use, which is kind of cool though. So if you had something in there, people were rating it, those ratings actually tie back into search and things like that too, and see so that search understands that it's more popular, which would also help, most likely help Copilot as well, if you guys are into Copilot. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to create my first column, which is tracking ID number. So I'll go select that and hit next.
All right, so for tracking ID number here, you might have noticed, hey guys, you called this a number, why'd you choose text? Well, there's a couple reasons for that. First, it's very common for us to see with different clients we work with that something like a tracking number isn't really just numeric, right? It might have some letters in there as well. It might be ABC123 is our tracking number. The other thing is we don't really intend to do any sort of calculations or math based on this column. So for flexibility's sake, we think that text is just going to be the better option for our particular use case here. Now, as we're actually creating this column, you'll find that we have several options sitting here. Of course, we can change the type, so don't feel like you were locked into whatever you first clicked on. If we wanted to set a default, we can as well right below that, and we can even try to calculate that default. But one that I really want to draw your attention to is the max number of characters. It started at 255 for this single line of text column type. We don't need that many characters for our tracking numbers. They're about maybe 5 to 10 characters long, so we're just going to go ahead and limit that to help our users fill it in correctly. We also know that we require this, so we have this require this column to contain information toggle checked. And we could also enforce unique values if we wanted to say that two different apps can never have the same tracking number. So we're just going to go ahead and turn that on for this case. And again, that'll just help the users fill in the information the way that we actually expect it to see, or expect it to be filled in. All right, column validation is something that's maybe for more of the advanced users out there, but if you wanted to do things like go ahead and make sure that an email address looks like an email address, you can actually do some validation and throw errors on the form to let people know, hey, you didn't fill this in correctly.
Awesome. And a lot of that stuff, if you're thinking, wow, how am I going to figure out, I'm not a coder, how do I figure out what formula should be here? All of this stuff is online. If you just looked up column validation email address, someone has the formula for you. You can copy it and paste it right inside of here. So that's not rocket science either. This is all still within the realm of a power user. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, and I'll go to the next one. I paused on this one so Tavon could explain some of the features. I'm just going to go a little bit faster on some of the other ones for time, but Tavon's going to keep talking about them.
Perfect. So the next field that we're going to create here is the description. So description is a little bit of a longer text field, right? Maybe 255 characters isn't enough. So with this multiple lines of text that we're creating here, what you're going to find is there is no upper limit realistically on the amount of text that we can have. Theoretically, there's some limit of like a couple gigabytes worth of information. You will almost never see anyone hit that limit. But the multi-line text has some other cool options here as well, like enhanced rich text to make the editor for this feel a little bit more like Word, where you can do your bullet points and highlighting and have hyperlinks that are clickable. And then append changes to existing text. I'll go through quickly, but really it's meant to keep a running log of things. Like maybe a comments field would use that append changes. So my entry would get kind of replaced in a way by a new entry in that field, but it would keep that history for us. All right, next up, let's go ahead and make the department column. And for this, we're going to use that managed metadata. So with this, the thing to keep in mind, managed metadata, the way that I always describe it, it's like a choice, but stronger, a choice on steroids, if you will. So we're able to define a universal set of options like our departments that we recognize as a company and have many different columns use that same actual back-end list of choices. So here we have this departments, what we call a term set that we created, and it's standard for our organization. So nobody else has to make and maintain their own list of departments. We can just reuse this same list of departments all over the place. It also does some other cool things as well, like helping us out with actually finding the right terms, and it lets us use aliases in a way that choices don't. So I could say, hey, I'm actually going to type in HR and have it recognize that I meant human resources. So just like with our other columns, you'll find that we can require it, we can enforce unique, or because this one is a choice type of column in a way, we can even allow multiple options to be selected. So in this case, we're just going to say it's one department, so no multi-select, and I think we will probably want it to be required.
And I think just to add a couple of things here, those who've been through governance with us, you know that there are a few things that need to be in everyone's governance and a few things that will really extend the life of your SharePoint environment. And we've talked about this several times in several webinars that we've done, and we've shown how to do manage metadata as well. Content types are the first, and then the second is manage metadata. Managed metadata allows you to add that consistency throughout your organization, and that increases the searchability of your environment as well. So you just think of it as tagging documents with the right information, but we think of managed metadata as tagging documents or tagging information with curated information, with curated tags, so tags that we want it to be instead of what someone else may want it to be. All right, thanks, Tavon. Let's go to the next one, which will be owner.
Awesome, owner. For owner, we've got this perfect column type here called person that we can actually use. So we mentioned this a second ago, but just to kind of reiterate, person or group is a type of column that actually goes out and interacts with your Active Directory, goes out and touches your Entra ID, whatever you want to call it these days. This is a really powerful thing because it lets me just say, oh, I know Kelsey's email address. I'll just start typing that in. Or, oh, I know Kelsey's name. Let me start typing that in and select her from the list of options. And then it does some other cool things as well, like letting me actually hover over that selection and get a contact card to pop out and show me where she fits in the organization, what her phone number is, all that kind of information you're tracking. All right, review date is our next column here. And like we said, this one is just a date selector, date picker. It does have a couple of options that I'll point out. Include time, if we wanted it to be a date and time selector. Pretty useful sometimes. Otherwise, it'll just default to midnight behind the scenes. And then friendly format. I don't personally use friendly format, but if I wanted to select today's date, and instead of having it say 6/24, have it say the word today, that's what friendly format is all about. And would also do things like yesterday or tomorrow or next week. So not always as specific, but it's there if you like that kind of thing.
Awesome. So I'm going to go do a choice column just so we can see how that's done. And choice columns also have formatting, so they'll give us a chance to talk about that as well.
All right, perfect. So a choice, like we said, similar to metadata, but a little bit more restricted. So here, when we're creating our choice column, you'll see that it lets us actually start plugging in what options we want somebody to have. Again, pretty useful for making some of those simple lists of options that we don't really need to reuse or standardize. Now, you'll find that next to each of these choices, we have the little color palette icon, and we have this Add Choice button at the bottom to keep expanding this list. So Microsoft, at some point, probably a couple years ago at this point, decided, people like when choices are colorful, so we're going to make them colorful by default. I've seen a lot of people say, I don't really want all of my choices to be colored, or I don't like those colors. Well, you can click on that color picker there and either decide no style, which just means we don't fill it in with color, or choose a different one of these kind of preset colors. Now, this is just doing formatting behind the scenes, so if you want to manipulate that a little bit more programmatically, you can. You just have to go to the more advanced column settings for it to decide on some other color options as well.
And I'm able to add columns here and then just delete them by simply clicking on these tools. So it's very intuitive as you go through.
Perfect. And the last thing here that I'll point out about choices is this add values manually checkbox. So what that's all about is the ability to say, I didn't really know all of the options people might want when I first set up this column. I just wanted to help them fill in information. Let me make it so that they can just type in whatever they want if it's not already there. That's what add values manually is all about. And just for the people out there who are wondering, yes, you can do that same thing with managed metadata as well, though that would be referred to as an open for submission term set.
And I would say if you had to make a decision between that, if you're in a place where adding additional values might be of interest to you, I'd say go with managed metadata. Because let's say I have these three choices and then someone manually enters in, so they don't select one of these, they manually enter in sensitive data. When the next person comes to go and fill in fields, they don't see sensitive there as in the dropdown. They just see these three again, right? But with managed metadata, as you add choices in there, those become part of the term set itself. And the next person that comes in and hits that dropdown sees all of those options in there. Plus, what if one person comes in here and enters in PII no instead of no PII because they didn't see it, they were fast typers, so they added in their own thing. Well, I could go with managed metadata, go in there and say, oh, those two things mean the same thing. Here, I'd have to go in and do some adjustments and go back and fix some things manually myself. So managed metadata is a great option and probably the better option, although it's a little bit more work for you to set up.
Perfect, perfect. All right, let's see. What do you say next we make that lookup?
All right.
Okay, cool. So for those of you more familiar with databases and relating tables, that's what a lookup is, but I'm not going to assume that everybody knows what that really means. So we have different lists sitting here on the site. We mentioned that approved vendors list earlier. Well, I might want to be able to choose one of those vendors as the actual party that we bought this app from. Instead of having to maintain that as another list of choices or even make that a metadata field, we can actually tie these lists together using a lookup. So when we're creating our item over here in the app tracker, we'll be able to look at all the options we have in that approved vendor list and choose one of them to tie this item to. Now, one note there with kind of a limitation of lookups is the lists have to be on the exact same site. Not the same site collection, not, in the same chain of sites, like one's on a higher level subsite, one's on a nested subsite. They have to be on exactly the same site for you to see them as options there. That is an unfortunate limitation because it would be cool if we could tie lists from different sites together, but just be aware they have to live kind of in the same location. We can also do some cool things here, like pulling extra information from that, what we'll call the source list or the parent list, into this list as well. Like we have the contact name and contact email being tracked on our approved vendors. Well, now we can click these checkboxes and have that show up in this list that we're creating as well.
Yeah. And just to show what that is, here's the actual vendor list where it has their title and then it has the contact name and then the contact email is hidden from this list. But it has all that information in. I'm saying I want to see those. When I pull over that one vendor, bring this extra information as well. So I'll go ahead and save that. And now our list is ready to go. Just so you know, you can just drag and drop these columns. So if you said this column needed to be first, you could just drag it around. This is just a view, okay? There's also a form that's with this. So if I was to click on a form here, then it would show me here's all those fields and I can enter the information in. So we're going to get a little bit into that real quick, but let's just take a look at my baked goods already. So I have that exact same list that we just created already done, and I have a couple of entries already inside of it just so you could see kind of information filled out, which is kind of cool, right? And so I have my titles, my tracking numbers, and all these really good things inside of it. And I'm looking at this data one way, but Tavon may not care about all of this data. So if I have 500 rows in here, some of them are no PII, some of them are PII, some of them are partial PII. He doesn't care about all those other ones. He just wants to see the ones that are no PII. So he might come into this list and just like an Excel document, sort it by A to Z, Z to A, or filter by, or group by, or even do totals if there's amounts inside of here, things like that. And so he's going to click on filter by. He's going to say, I just want to see the ones that are no PII, and he's going to apply that, right? And now he's not seeing all the data. He's just seeing it scoped down to what he needs to be able to do stuff. In addition to that, he could create a view of that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get to clear that filter. You can either clear it here or clear it on the other side. So I cleared that filter. Let's just say that we want to do one by the owner as well, like grouped by owner. So I'll come in here and click on that and group it by owner. And now I kind of see it as little folders, if you will, where I can drill into and see which ones are owned by each person, right? And so let's say I like this view so much that I want to save this so that other people can just come straight to this view. Well, up here is where all your views are listed on list. And then when you go in here to the all items, you see that there's a little star. It's saying, hey, someone changed this view, but it's not saved yet. Well, I don't want to save over the all items view. I appreciate the all items view. I'm just going to save a view as. So I'll do that, and I'll come in here and say this is the owner view. Oh, if I could just type in there, owner's view.
Just a
All
heads
right.
up, you two keep chatting away. We're about halfway through.
Awesome, thanks. So I have the owner's view here, and I see that I'm making this a public view, which means others will be able to come and see this view as well. If I didn't make it a public view, then only Jared would be able to see it. I'm the one who created it. I'm the only one that can see it, and I'm not getting in anyone else's way. I'll make it a public view and just save that so you can see what happens. And now I have three views on this list. One is the owner's view, one is the no PII information, and then the other is the all items view. So views are really cool, but we're going to talk more about views and show you a little bit more as we go forward, as we continue to go forward. But Tavon, do you want to talk about the how they add data into here?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple different ways that you can add data into a list. First, I'll just point it out. There's this Edit in Grid View button for those of you who like to work in a table format like you're used to in Excel. We can hit that Edit in Grid View. You can edit any of these cells individually. You can add new item to add a whole new row. So this is pretty useful for mass manipulating your data. But SharePoint lists also come with a few different what we'll call forms on them. By default, every list is going to have three of these. One's called the new form for when we're creating a new item. One's called the edit form for when we're editing an existing item. And one's called the display form for when we just want to see some information. So here we clicked on this item. Before we clicked that edit button, we were in display mode on that display form. When we clicked edit all, we were in the edit form experience. And when we hit add new item, we're in that new form. So those, I just want to point out that they're there, they're on every list, and you can actually manipulate these. So we could say, hey, I don't actually want to see maybe the, I don't know, app description on this form. Or hey, I'd actually like to only show the owner column if it's a certain department that we selected. You can actually set up some conditions and some formatting around these forms as well. We're not going to dive too deep into that today, but for the power users out there, just know that is possible. You'll also see here as we're filling in this item, we're actually interacting with all those different types of data. So here we're looking at that multi-line of enhanced rich text, and you'll see that we have all these options like coloring things, bolding them, strike-throughs, different fonts. Again, just the same way that you're used to working with text in something like Word.
And check out my
Departments here.
department. Check out my department. So this is the coolest thing about managed metadata. So Tavon mentioned that I can have aliases here as well. So a person might come in here and not know the official name of a department, but if they typed in HR because they were thinking, hey, this is HR related, what they're going to see is there's the alias for HR, but when they click enter, or if they just hit the enter button or select it, either one, it's going to convert that to human resources, adding the consistency to all the selections that people are adding. If they come in and they say IT, like you'll see that IT and ITS are both aliases for information technology. And when they click that, it's going to revert it back over to information technology, which is really cool. And you might say, well, Jared, what if they don't know any of it, right? So what if they try to type it and it doesn't come up? Well, there's a tag button out here. So this is about tagging, right? There's a tag button at the end, which takes you to the actual list for that term set. So all the terms in that term set, and they can just come in here and choose. So this is supposed to be operations. They click there and they're good to go. We love that column. That's a lot of power and that's a lot of consistency in your environment.
Perfect. And then this owner column, again, is a person type of column. So as we type my name in here, you'll find that it went up to our Active Directory, found me, let us choose my account. And that's really a powerful column type, not just for seeing that extra information about me, but also letting me do things like filter to a me view, right? Because it recognizes who I'm signed in as. All right, and then we've got the choice column we filled in, and then this is our lookup here at the bottom. So with this lookup, notice these are all those entries from our approved vendors list. Now, one thing that I'll just point out is this is searchable. So you might be sitting there thinking, gosh, I'm going to have like 1,000 entries in my other list. How am I ever going to scroll through them? Don't worry, you can type to narrow this down and search through them. And we'll
Love
find our chicken on a stick here.
it. Awesome.
All right.
And then I'll go ahead and save that. And then that data will be here inside of the environment. There's a new one that I added in there. So really kind of interesting things that we can do here with the list. And again, I'm just tracking information. This is really easy to be able to work with and to be able to go through and do awesome things. So we have more to show you though. So we're going to jump forward just a little bit because Tavon talked about these forms, but there's actually another type of form now to work with. And let's go take a look at that. So I'll jump over here to this private site, a site where no one but the IT team can get to. And here's a list that only the IT team can see. And Tavon, take us to where we need to go.
All right, perfect. So, like you mentioned, this is a list of tickets that only the IT team can ever get to. Nobody else can see this, no one else knows it exists, no one will ever interact with this list unless it's through one or two exceptions. So, traditionally, in a setup like this, where we have a list of, say, tickets or other information that nobody should see, but they might need to submit into, we used to use Microsoft Forms and workflows to take information out of those Microsoft Forms and dump them into this list. That works really, really well. But there are some issues there, right? Forms, Microsoft Forms, don't support all the SharePoint column types. They don't do people well. Microsoft Forms also isn't really tied to that list. So if we make a change like adding a column, we have to do it to the list, to the Microsoft form, and to the workflow linking them together. That's a lot of duplicated effort. Microsoft saw that and how common of a practice that was and said, we've got a better idea. So now at the top of every list, you're going to find this button here called Forms. If we click on that, what it actually lets us do is, we'll just go kind of walk you through creating a new form here. It lets us build these actually pretty good looking, similar looking to Microsoft Forms, types of list forms that we can actually share with people to fill in and submit information. So this is a pretty good at the moment form designer, but it's also something they're continuing to invest very heavily into. So there's changes to this happening all the time. Right now, we're just going to give this a title. If we wanted to add a logo, we could, or add a little description of the form, we're able to. And then over on the side, you'll find we also have the option to do things like branching. But again, this is just a form builder. So if you want to move columns around on the form, we can. If we want to hide columns from the form so people don't fill them in, we can uncheck them over on the side. One thing to note here is that this is actually tied into the list really, really closely. So if we tried to do something like add a field onto this form, it would actually add that field to our list as well. So just be aware of that if you're trying to actually delete or add fields onto your form. It's really manipulating the list behind the scenes while you're doing that as well. All right. So the other thing that I'll point out here is again, yes, branching is definitely worth knowing. That's something that was requested for a long time when these first came out. Just like you're used to seeing with Microsoft Forms or other form building solutions, we can actually have different options take you to different parts of the form and hide or show different questions to you that might be relevant. Like if it's a SharePoint issue, maybe we want to ask more follow-up questions about that. Or if it's a account issue, maybe we say end this form and have them get in touch with somebody outside of regular IT support. All right. So back here on our kind of main screen, I'll just point out these different columns because you might have seen that we have involved equipment as a column that we selected here. So involved equipment, if you can't tell, that little back and forth arrow icon there indicates that it's a lookup. I told you earlier that lookups mean, that we can select information from another list. We'll talk more about why that's an interesting option here in just a second when we get to the permissions that are involved in this form. But just so you know, people who don't have access to this list can actually fill in this form. People who don't have access to this site can fill in this form. That means I know a lot of alarm bells might be going off in some of your heads about that lookup because I mentioned that lookup ties to something that lives on the same site. Don't worry, Microsoft thought of that. So if we were to send this form to someone like Kelsey who can't get to this IT tickets or IT private site, she wouldn't be able to select any of that involved equipment. So definitely keep that in mind as you're designing your lists and deciding what columns are going to be required. Because if we require that and she can't ever fill it in, she's not ever going to be able to submit this form.
Nice.
All right. So a couple other options to just highlight here. If we go to themes, it's all about kind of the background look and feel of the form. We can change the color. We have a little create your own style, but it's kind of limited right now. I think this is something they'll continue to invest in. And then in the settings, we can decide, should the form creator get notified when somebody fills it in? Are we accepting responses? And do we want to actually limit when we accept responses to a certain date window? And then what should people see when they click the submit button? Right now, it's just your response has been submitted, but if we wanted to say thanks or include a little smiley face, we're totally able to do so. All right, so now let's go to the send form. So I mentioned a second ago that the permissions on this form don't actually follow the permissions on the list. This right here is showing you the only option that you have right now for permissions for who can fill in this form. People in your organization with the link can respond. I have no control over locking that down. I have no control over sending it externally or anything like that. It's just people in my org with this link can fill in this form. That is one of the things that people have brought up many, many times on the feedback for these forms. They're really cool, but I want to control who can fill them in. Microsoft has heard that feedback. They haven't done anything about it yet, but they've definitely heard and responded to a few of those suggestions as one of the things they're looking into.
So if I went to preview right now, and let's go back here to customize, I still have that item selected for involved equipment. And so I'll just go to preview to see what the user would kind of see. They would see all of this inside of here, and they'd be able to fill it out and submit. So when they were down here, if I have permissions to get to that, I'll see the drop-down list. If I didn't have permission to that, you're saying when they clicked on that, it would just sit there and spin for them, and they would never be able to fill out that field. And so if that
Yes.
was required, that would be a problem. Okay, cool. And so that's nice, but this is what the user would see if they were out there, right? And so we're just saying all the user needs is this link.
Yep. All they'll need
Nice.
is this link. We can put that on a home page. We can put it in Teams, send it to somebody. However they get that link, they'll be able to fill in this form. And again, that doesn't mean they have permissions to this list or anything like that. It's just that they can fill in this form, and that automatically adds something into our list for us.
Nice. So you're saying I'm creating a ticketing system in the IT department, but the form for that ticketing system could be on the main hub or be on any site that I have or be shown inside of Microsoft Teams or something like that. That's pretty interesting. That's amazing stuff.
All right, perfect. So let's see then. Why don't we take a quick look at some of the views that we've created on maybe this list or maybe even on our approved vendor list, just to highlight a few more things views can do.
Yep. So let's go over to the approved vendors list for just a second. So this is a list you saw me connect to earlier, and you saw kind of in our slide deck as well. It has a little bit of information inside of here. And so there's a couple of things about it that I just want to talk about that are interesting. So first, I'll kind of go through a few different types of views that I have on here, and I'll create one as well. So like I said, I have the all items view that's really just showing me everything and really all the columns. Actually, there's a couple of columns that are not being shown here, but that's fine. And then I have my approved vendors view, which, whoa, that doesn't even look like a list anymore. What's going on there, right? Let me go and see if I can get another item approved here. I'll get this guy right here for the Hadron Collider. We're having a sale on those. And we'll go in and change it to approved. We like those guys now. They're good in good standing. So now those are approved. Now I go to this other vendors approved. Oh, look at that. Doesn't even look like a list anymore. So these look like cards. And you can manipulate these cards to show whatever you want on them, which is really kind of nice, right? But these are very helpful for looking at data in a different way. And I'm going to give you an example of that in just a second. Then I also have over here a board view, right, which is like a Kanban board where you just saw me make this one Hadron Collider approved. Well, I also need the Vulcans are very honorable, right? So we're going to just drag them over here and put them inside of the approved as well. And you'll see that it changed their approved status to approved because this view that I created was based on status, and it separated into all the different statuses I have: denied, approved, pending, and then ones that aren't even set yet, right? And so I'll just take these guys right here, oops, and drag them over into approved, and now I have 4 items that are approved. And that's pretty cool to be able to do as well. So when I go back over to my approved vendors, I can see that those 4 guys are sitting there. And that's really neat to be able to do. I'm going to add one more view, and then I'm going to show you how to better utilize these views, right? I'm going to give you a scenario for that. So I'll go into add a view, which is the button right up here. I'm going to call this my calendar view. Calendar view. And then I'm going to select, instead of list, I'll select calendar. So that other one was gallery that I showed you. And then there's also the one for the board. So I showed you both of those just a second ago. For my calendar, I'm going to go in and say that which default view of this do I want? I kind of want the month view because I like a bunch of squares on there, right? And then I get to pick what date am I concerned about in my calendar. So if you have a range, like let's say this was a project tracker and you had a project start date and project projected end date, you might want to use the start date for the start date and the end date for the end date, right? That makes sense. For me, I just want to show these events on a calendar on that date. So I'm going to go in here and choose the approved renewal date there and the approved renewal date for that. So it shows me every column that I have that has date qualities, like the created and modified and those things. So they'll all be in that list. So I have those 2 things shown here. I'm going to make that a public view. Down here, I'm going to tell it on the actual calendar itself, go ahead and show the title on there for that. And you could choose from any column. You could say, I want to show the contact person or whatever that is in some weird stuff. But I'm going to show the title. And then I'll just create that. And what that creates for me is a bunch of squares. So let me go back over here to my list and change one of them's review date or approval date to like this month. Where are we at in the dates there? Boop. So I'll bring that back to whatever the 26th, just so you guys can see that show up on the calendar. And then I'll go to my calendar view here, and we'll see sure enough on the 26th, there's that guy. So I can make calendars out of this. And this is the reason we wanted to mention this one is because those who came from older SharePoint, Classic, over into new SharePoint, and you were left without a calendar option, wow, that was depressing, wasn't it? And I still say the better of all the calendars is the old Classic event calendar. But if you need to make an adjustment and you want to create your own calendar views, you can actually do them inside of a list. All right, so let's go back to this approved vendors. And let me give you a story to go with this. So I could have my users come to the approved vendor list to look through the list of approved vendors and pending vendors and ones that have been denied and all of that stuff. I could just have them come and look at this themselves. And they could see inside of here whether it's approved. They could see the max. Now they don't know what max means, but they could make assumptions. They could say, oh, is this the max that per year that we can spend with them? Or is this the max that we can do in a lifetime? Or is this the max in one order? Like, what does this actually mean? So since they don't know, what they're going to end up doing is making a phone call over to the internal rep or an email over to the internal rep and asking that question, right? And then I've got some extra data in here. But to make this better, what if they just did this? What if you did this? I created a page all about my vendors and my vendor suppliers. I gave them all the information about vendors, including this one sentence here that says the list provides the name and contact information and also the max amount that you can spend with a vendor or supplier without additional approval. So it didn't mean any of the things that I talked about. It meant something different. And then I took that view and I put it right here on this page with other vendor related stuff like, hey, want to request a new vendor? That takes us to a form, like one of the forms that kind of Tavon showed us. I also have it down here, a Microsoft form for taking the survey for after you use that vendor. So I put it all in the same context on a page and then gave them a way to easily view it instead of like a list view. And I thought that was pretty cool and something we just wanted to point out to everybody and just give you some ideas. All right, Tavon, do you think we should jump over to a more complete app and talk about like how flows and how extra functionality ties in?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And it just so happens we've got one here called the Client Activity Tracking, or CAT, in another one of our demo setups here for SpinMed. You want to run through what we're really looking at here on this homepage?
Sure. So on the homepage, what I did was take some of those views and put them right here on the homepage. So the salesperson comes in, they can see, or a manager even comes in and sees what's overdue or due today. This green one right here is due today. We need to be contacting them. These guys right here are late. We should have contacted them last week. Over here on the other side, I have, these are my recent activities. So things that I've recently done all show up here for me. So if I was working on something, I could just go right back to working on it. which is kind of cool. So where does that data come from? Where are these items coming from? Where are those views of those lists? We have in this application, this SharePoint site, we have three lists. One to track the project that they're on. So we see here that there's multiple projects that we work with, and inside of there, we even have a flow in the background that when you create a new project, it'll generate an actual site for that. And we have some logic to see if there's already a client site for that, if there's not, and a whole bunch of other things, but it just gives you the URL to that site. We know the client name here. We know the status of the project. So for I could again, I could have views based upon the client projects or based. So here's view based on the clients themselves. So you see, I can roll that down. Then I can have a view based on the project manager. So here's each project manager and what they want to see. Here's the salesperson view. So the salesperson come in and look at the ones that mean something to them. And they can even create their own private views for that. So lots of information there. And just by having that list, I'm opening up some doors. I'll get there in just a second. Then I have this contacts list, which is holding all the people that we're supposed to contact. And because this can be, I can copy information from Excel documents over into here, we have an import of an Excel document every month that we do either through a flow or someone goes to the Excel document, copies all the information, clicks on edit mode, and just dumps it in here. And we have all these new people that we need to contact, right? That's pretty cool. And so inside of here, I have their email address. Imagine what I can do just because I have their email address, right? I have some lookups going over to like their company names and things like that. So I have all that in there. Oh, that's actually managed metadata. So I have their company names in here. So I can do views based on company, views based on the priority that we think they are, and so forth, right? Then over here, I have the actual activities. So every time an email comes in or we get a phone call, the salesperson or PM makes an entry inside of here. And this has also to do with us contacting them back because in our line of business, we have to constantly continue to communicate with them. And so we put on here the last date we communicated with them, but also we have a reminder date here for when we're supposed to get with them next. And this is what you saw kind of on the home page, a smaller view of this. And so it has like, these are okay. The red ones are, hey, that's overdue. And then the green ones are for today, right? And so this is really kind of cool. But Tavon, because I have all this information in here, what are some things that I could do with this data as far as automation and changing this whole site into just its own application?
All right, great question. So you already mentioned one of my favorite workflows that we have on this site, and that's the project site creation flow. So again, think about the power there. You have different projects. Those projects need a place to store their documents, to store their data, make sure that that project information is secure. Wouldn't it be cool if just by putting a project into our list, we know that we've got the project site set up correctly, it's got the right permissions on it, the project manager can decide who has access to it, and we write that link back to our central project list and make sure that only the right people can actually click on that? Well, that's something that we build a lot of workflows for in project site style setups. And that's what the SpinMed team is really taking advantage of here with their client activity tracker. But that's maybe more of an advanced workflow. What about some of those simpler ones that are just some notifications or just keeping us on track with our day-to-day business? Over here in the activities list, we actually also have several different workflows that are running. One of our workflows is we call it cat reminders. It's a Power Automate workflow that we'll pull it up just to show you. But really what it does every day is it comes through and it checks this list for things that are overdue or things that are due today, and it notifies the right people about it. And by due today or overdue, I mean that next contact date or that reminder date is today or sometime in the past. So what you're going to see whenever this loads, I'm not going to run through too much of building a workflow like this. We've done presentations on that in the past if you want to see them. It's okay if this doesn't load. But
Yeah, I'll
basically
let it
the
load in the background.
concept here is just that it goes out, checks over this list, says, oh, this was overdue. Let me find the salesperson for that and actually go right on ahead and send them an email. And the email that it sends them pulls information from this activities list and information from our projects list and information from our contacts list. So we can just pull up one of those emails here. And what you're going to find is that it includes the contact name, the contact's email, our last communication date, their phone number, any updates or notes that we were tracking. It tells us up in the subject line there what project this was about. And again, this is automatically going out every day for things that are due today or overdue by, I think it's 30 days that we're concerned about.
Awesome.
All
All right,
right,
we'll give
if
this
this
one more
does
chance.
decide to load, then you'll see that it's a very simple workflow overall. All it really does is it has that recurrence trigger to say, trigger this every day, get the items, and then checks a couple of conditions. It does a couple of date calculations as well, but we don't need to worry about loading that for now too
All right.
much.
Well, we'll let it load, and I'll promise you that we have one more to talk about, and we'll come back and check this guy to see if he's loaded yet.
All right. So another workflow that we've built here that our salespeople in SpinMed really love to use is just adding one of these reminders to their calendar. It's one thing to get that email every day or to get that email when, you're actually overdue for something, but a lot of people like to look ahead. And not all of our salespeople want to come to the client activity tracker every day. They might just want to look at their calendar and see what they were supposed to do that day. So we went ahead and built them a workflow here called Add Reminder to Calendar. What'll happen when we click on that is it'll go ahead and it'll grab the information about this particular activity, this contact, this project. It'll actually go over to their calendar and it'll add this on that reminder date. It adds it at 9 a.m. Every time they click on it right now. If we wanted to build this out in a way they could specify the time, we certainly could. But just for consistency, we just set it at 9 a.m. because that's when our salespeople really start their day and start looking at who they're supposed to be getting in touch with.
All right, we promise you that's going to work.
Unfortunately, connection speeds and Power Automate being a little bit slow sometimes can make these things take a little bit of time to load. But I promise it does work, and it does actually add that event over to their calendars. I don't know
Wow,
if you still have one sitting on your calendar. We could at least show it having been added there.
nope, I think we removed it just so we have a clean slate there, but that's okay. These are probably just slowdowns for Microsoft, but we'll check back in just a second and we'll show you those. So we're good.
All
All right,
right.
is there any other flows you want to talk about, things that we did inside of here?
So those are the main ones to highlight. But just so you guys know, you don't necessarily have to be advanced or a power user to get started with automation against your lists, right? These were very simple workflows overall, but there are even simpler, basically just click a button out of the box workflows that you can create as well for things like send me a reminder 20 days in advance of that next contact date or notify your salesperson whenever a new item gets added into that list. Microsoft has some pretty interesting built-in functions for helping with simple automation as well.
So Tavon, let's talk through the cat reminder. So this one sends out reminders just so people have it kind of on their screens or in the video at least.
All right, perfect. So again, we won't go too deep into building workflows. We've got other webinars for that, but what we're doing here is using Power Automate, the very visual drag and drop, you get what you see type of workflow builder that Microsoft provides in their M365 environments. So up at the top here, we have what we call a trigger. It's a recurrence trigger, which just means periodically it kicks off this workflow. Right now, this one says, I will run every day at, I think that's around, 6 a.m. our time. Notice
Yep.
that it's in UTC there, the Z at the end of that timestamp. Then it goes out to our list and it actually gets all of the items. A lot of times you'll find that it renders that list name to be pretty for you. Here it decided it just wanted to show us the GUID for the list, but that is truly our activities list. Then it gets the current time and the time as of 30 days ago. It uses those just for holding on to dates. Then it loops over each of those items that it found. For anyone not familiar with that idea, it just means we're repeating the same steps for each of the items we grabbed from our activities list. First thing that it does here is it goes out and it gets the project. That way we have all the project's information on top of what we already pulled into that list with our lookups. Then it just sends an email, right? So it checks, is the reminder date today? If so, then it goes down this if yes side here, and it sends an email to the salesperson saying, hey, reminder, go ahead and get in touch with this contact at this email, and here's your notes and updates from previous conversations with them. If it found that that reminder date was not today, we go down this other side where we check another condition. This one just says, well, was that reminder date 30 days ago or further out? And when was the last time that we updated them? When was our last contact with the person? If it would spend more than 30 days not contacting them and we're overdue to contact them, we're going to go ahead and send that salesperson a different email that goes ahead and tells them, hey, your 30-day no contact reminder is sitting here.
Yep. Awesome. Let's just try this one more time, see if the system's speeding up for us. And if it is, we'll show you what it does. And if not, we'll kind of move forward.
Oh, there it goes. It's trying to load this run flow interface. So for anyone who hasn't seen this before, what it's loading right here is Power Automate's little pop-out window for when you try to run a workflow manually. Again, our connection seems to be having some problems right now, so it's not fully loading. But all you'll see there is a run flow button down at the bottom, and when you click on that, in this case, it goes ahead and adds that to the calendar, which we think is pretty valuable for a setup like what we're doing here with the client activity tracker, really tying the list into other things like your calendar. Oh,
There we
there
go.
it is.
Way to
Perfect.
fill time there, Taylor. We appreciate that. All right,
Awesome.
so I clicked on it. That date is 7/11, and for everybody's, just for your general knowledge, it normally is really, really fast. In fact, we ran this morning as we were just prepping to make sure everything was good to go, and it was super fast. So that's just a trade-off for when we get actually into the demo. It's just, it's how it is. So let me go here to the 11th, and there is that item. It just added on there. And it's just telling us little contact this particular email address, tells us information about what the company is and so forth. So that is pretty cool to be able to do. That's a great practical case because that's a great business idea. Like what we built there was a CRM, a little contact or a relational set of lists that allows us to just track our contacts. And now my salesperson or my PM has just a simple way to go ahead and right click and add this to their calendar. That's useful information there. So that's pretty cool stuff. So, all right, I'm going to jump back into slides because of time and just say, we do have other webinars on Power Automate where we go in detail, and one of them is actually where we built out a project site as well. And so if you want to know how to do those things step by step and such, we do have webinars for that at spintree.com/webinars. All right. Since we're at time, Kelsey, I'll let you go ahead and then we can talk more.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if anyone has to jump and can stick around for questions, that's absolutely okay. Like I said, my contact information is there. So if you have any questions we couldn't get to today, you can send those my way. But we'll stick around a little bit longer to answer some questions here. Okay, so one of the questions I have here is there any other way to connect two lists together besides a lookup column?
Yep. So that's actually a good question. We kind of mentioned it earlier, and we decided that if we got questions around it, we'd go ahead and show a demo for it. So that's a good question. Let me just go back a little bit and try to show you what we mean. So first of all, one of the things we talked about is being able to have that metadata inside of there and being able to connect things together with metadata. And so having one list here that has a metadata column that's looking at, say, department, right? And then having another metadata list somewhere, or list that has a metadata column in it somewhere else, even on another site, having that same column there, those two are now looking at the same data. So if you're programmatically looking at these, like I'm creating a Power App that says, go look at list number 1. When you find that department, go over to some other list. You can certainly do that and have it linked that way by a common set of data. But if you're going to do that, it should be metadata, managed metadata, because that has that consistency and that stability built into it. So that's one way to do that. Do we have any other questions there, Kelsey?
Perfect. I see a couple of other questions. One that's sitting out there for us is, are SharePoint lists the same as Microsoft lists? So that one, I think you're talking about the lists app that Microsoft has, and yes, those are pretty much exactly the same thing. SharePoint lists came first. Microsoft lists is just kind of a wrapper around that. In fact, I believe a lot of the lists that you make in Microsoft lists tie themselves to either a SharePoint site or your OneDrive, which is itself a SharePoint site.
Absolutely. I've got another one here that says Spindustry taught us all about content types. Do content types come into play with lists?
Yes, so I'll answer that, but let me just say, even when I clicked on this lookup inside of that list that I was on, inside of my SharePoint site, when it showed me that relational item from the other list, you'll see up here at the top, it says Microsoft List, which is something they broke a while ago and haven't fixed yet, but you'll see the icon here for Microsoft List as well. And so some of those benefits of Microsoft List is like being able to have lists that are offline and things like that, where you need to experiment with first to see if it's really going to meet your need, if it really works the way that you want it to be able to work. We prefer to work with those lists in the context of SharePoint because I don't want my users having so many different places to go to work on stuff, right? So keep them focused on SharePoint because I'm also feeding them governance information too. Like here's all the corporate information we want to push out. Here's where your work is. Here's where your documents are. Keeping them in that stable environment. All right, so let me answer the question about the content types. So what if I wanted to create a list that was based on a content type? Would that be hard or would that be easy? And I appreciate that question because you're right. A lot of we did teach content types, and that's probably ingrained in what you do inside of your governance. So check this out. I'm going to go here to my site contents, and I will just go in and create a new list. And it'll just be a blank list again. I'll give it a name. I'll just call it list, oops, from content type, and I'll just create that. So I created a new list. I went through that first step again, the same way we did earlier. And it just comes with title, and that's all. We know that every list and every library in the world has title, so we don't have to worry about that. So here I'm going to go to the list settings, which is under the cog. You'll see list settings. And then I'm going to turn on content types. Just like those who have been through content type training with us, you know that you do the same thing for libraries, right? So same steps that you do for a library. So we go here to advanced settings. We'll turn on the management of content types and go down to the bottom and just click OK, ignoring all the other signs that they give you inside of there. And now you see this whole section here about content types. And what we'll do is add from existing content types. And I just happen to have a couple of content types that we've used for lists. So I'll just go grab one of those. So I have this one here for imaging, for doing images in a scroller. So I'll just add that over, and then I'll click go. So there's my content type there. I've added it to my list. And now you'll see that it brought in all those columns like destination URL. So you see these guys right here, the news image, the published state, the teaser information, and so forth. But I want to get rid of this other one, the default one that's inside of here, which is item. An item, just for those who need to know, is the base content type for all things in SharePoint. This is the starting point of everything, right? And so in here, I want to go ahead and delete this content type. I'm deleting it from the list, not from the world, okay? And that's okay. If it was already in use, it would tell you that it's already in use and that it can't delete it until you clear that up. So now that I have that, all these columns are already here with this list. So let's prove that, right? So go back over to here. I don't see any of those columns because they're associated to the list, but I'm just not looking at them. I'm not showing them like my created and created by. I'm just not showing them. So I'm going to click here on the add button like we talked about before. Click on the show or hide columns. And then inside of here, I'm going to add that publisher date, the teaser, the news, the destination URL. And I think the published date should come right there. And I think the news image should be at the end. So I just rearranged that a little bit. This guy's not even in the picture, so I won't add him. I'm also going to add like my created and created by date as well. And so I'll go ahead and click apply with that. And now I do have all those columns available inside of my view. And this is significant what we just did there. So take the case of having a list that has grown so much, like let's say it has just information over the last 5 years, and you're like, I need to start getting some of this data out of here and into an archive. Well, to reproduce that list, you could just copy the list, or you could make it based on the content type was there. So if you have a content type, it'd be very easy to replicate that list and then move data over into it. And oftentimes what we find is someone will say, well, I'm just creating a list. I'm never going to have a duplicate of this or anything like that. Then all of a sudden you need to archive stuff. And that archive might need to be on some other site as well, not necessarily on this site. So using a content type for all of that is just something that's a good best practice and a good shortcut. Also helps you programmatically for several things. So I could talk about content types all day.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. I got another question here. Someone said all this was really helpful, but they wanted to know what's possible to build. What can you make with all this? How far you can take it?
Maybe we could answer that, Tavon, by just talking about some of the things that we have built.
Okay. Sounds good to me. So, I mean, one of the we mentioned this as we went, but one of the most common things that I'll see a lot of organizations get use out of when it comes to lists is something like maintaining project sites, right? Having that central place where I can go enter in my project information, have that spin up a SharePoint site for me, and make sure that it's well secured is something that a lot of organizations we've worked with have actually taken pretty great advantage out of. Here you'll find another example of that, this projects and committees list. In fact, this particular list takes that idea and goes even further. It actually not just makes that site in SharePoint and secures it, it also creates a channel over in Teams for that project so that the project team has a place to talk. If we click on one of these sites here, you'll find that they're all based on our standard project template. But again, it secures them, it adds the right content, names the site based on the project, all those things that you're expecting it to do when it spins up a templated project site. This is doing all of those things for you. And all the effort you have to go through is creating a list item. You don't have to worry about making that site, securing it, anything like that.
Awesome. But I think there's things like facilities maintenance sites. Contract management is one that we do a lot of. So if you just need something that really reminds us that the contracts are about to expire ahead of time, so we can go back in and negotiate that contract to get, lower the prices or do whatever. Those are things that people were tracking in Excel documents that we moved out of Excel and just into list, one or more lists to have that done. And I think earlier I mentioned credential tracking and things like that for some of the medical organizations that are here. Credentialing applications are pretty expensive if you go to a third party to get them for really doing a very little bit of work. It's not doing a lot of work. So being able to move that over into SharePoint is something that we found was useful for different organizations.
I'll also just mention on top of that, we talked about CRMs when we were discussing the client activity tracker, but that is another very common thing that we'll see built. So really, I think the way to think about what's possible when it comes to lists is what apps are you currently using that are just tracking data in some way? Maybe they're doing calculations with it. Maybe they're notifying you based on it. Maybe they're securing that data. At the end of the day, if all they really do at their core is they store data and process it, lists can probably do that same thing.
Yeah. And I guess we keep saying data, but data and documents even, all that tied together. Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, you guys. Well, that's probably all the time we have for questions for now. But like I said, you all will receive a recording of this webinar and the slides as well. And as well, my contact information is on the last slide of this slide deck. So if there's anything we didn't get to, if you have further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out because we would love to answer those for you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Buddy.
Thanks, all.